So I was having a little think to myself, and one thing that we hear oft repeated is that, you know, we've got like the worst death rate in the world and so on when it comes to the pandemic. And I've got a tuppence to chip in on that particular subject. Now, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist, but I read a lot. I read a lot of medical literature. That sort of thing fascinates me. And one thing that I did tend to pick up on or notice was that there's one thing that I don't think that people have clocked. So the one thing that can deplete your immune system faster than anything else, aside from obviously some very nasty diseases out there, but one thing that can really do it is stress. I was reading the other day, there was a meta-analysis of 200 odd papers, Suzanne Segerstrom and Greg Miller, 2006, if you're the Googling type. And the one thing that I noticed from that was that in those papers they said that a person subjected to stress will have 30% or up to factors of up to 30% less white blood cells, and of the white blood cells that they do have, so things like natural killer cells, they only work at 80%, or they lose 20% of their efficiency because of stress. And so I was thinking to myself that kind of like part of the public reaction to this has been, you know, kind of like when the public ordinarily they're inactive about something, so is an idea of, oh, we'll lumber fear onto them. So if we get them afraid, what will happen is that they'll do what they can to try and bring it within their control. But you can't always control things, but it's a way of trying to trigger that kind of like good behaviour. Is you absolutely scare the bejesus out of somebody, and then they're likely to do whatever it is you ask them to do. So it's not something that I approve of, by the way. I personally think it's a bit of a vile thing to do, but that's by the by. But you know, you scare them, and then they do things that they think will bring it under their own control, and surprise, surprise, with a pandemic it doesn't. But what it does do is it makes people realise that it is out of their control, and then lumbers on them unimaginable levels of stress. And what is the consequence of that stress? Well, according to the meta-analysis of Suzanne Segerstrom and Gregory Miller, the result of that stress is a depleted and weakened immune system. And so, it's kind of like, if we look at like a year ago, we didn't have the vaccine then. We didn't have any forms of treatment then. So what was it that we needed to do? What did we need to make sure was tip-top? Our immune system. And what did they do? Well, they lumbered stress on people, which depleted their immune system. And so, kind of like, for me, it's one of those things that I think has just been done, and it's just so counterproductive. Don't get me wrong, we're a year on now. It's just so counterproductive. And then I think to myself, well, if the best way to tackle it, as things stand now, is to relax a little bit. To that end, I would suggest, take your daily exercise, get out, enjoy the great outdoors.